Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. We're back for another webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about using AI to get your data ready for operationalized AI. Lots of big words there that we'll unpack for sure. I'm Josh Scott. I head up solution engineering here at Sparq. And my background is in building outcomes-driven web applications or applications of any shape and size, honestly. And obviously data and AI are a key part of every application, or data is for sure, and AI is becoming more and more a part of everything that we do at Sparq. I will want to open it to the panel. Stephen, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So, Stephen Anderson, I actually head up the data and AI practice for Sparq. Work a lot with Josh in having conversations with customers about what is possible, particularly around this topic of using AI to get your organization ready for AI and other things as well. Have a long background in tech, about 4 decades. Started writing early AI and machine learning back in the 1980s, actually. So have been around the block a couple of times. And I think my gray hair is showing through on that. So I will hand it over to John Clapper next.
So I'm John Clapper. I lead the data engineering practice here at Sparq, and I have been in the industry for about 15 years. Anything from building out dashboards and doing analyst work to building out full scale solutions and pipelines. And I've also worked with Josh and Steven and Jamie on multiple working with customers on helping them with their data solutions and with an AI as well. So just excited to be here. And I'll hand it over to Jamie.
Hey everybody, I'm Jamie Bayer. I'm a principal consultant here at Sparq. Been in the data field for well over 20 years now, with an early focus in my career in Python development and software engineering, with a recent push to a lot of AI focused applications. Looking forward to this discussion today.
We're going to jump right in. Just a few ground rules. We want this to be interactive. We're a bunch of geeks, and so you give us data and AI to talk about. We can 100% talk about that all by ourselves for much more than 45 minutes. That being said, the best bet is if we get to hear from you. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and one of us or Laura, who is in the background running things, will pop up and let us have that and let us hear that question. We'll answer it. Many times we'll answer in real time, but if not, please let us. The other thing we like to do at Sparq, we don't want to use big words for the sake of big words, so we'll try to make sure that we define things as we go. If there's something that we mention that that the term doesn't make sense, or you've heard it as something else, please feel free to ask for clarification. The goal here is to really spark a conversation and just really see what we can do to interact with you. So we are going to get started. And Stephen, I'm going to ask you the first question. What do we mean around operationalizing AI? What do we mean by that?
Great question to start with. So operationalizing AI is really the concept of applying it in some material ways inside your enterprise to solve problems. And usually these problems are centered around where humans are having to apply a lot of effort, right, to do something. So interesting tidbit, there's been some statistics released recently that say 8 out of 10 AI deployments inside the enterprise fail today. And the number one reason for that is because they really didn't get applied in a space where they were making a practical impact, right, for the business. So the ROI just didn't measure out. Simply translated, it's not much better than when the humans were doing the work, right? So our take on it is really to, again, focus in on AI that can make that material difference, right? Where you have KPIs, where the needle is moving. And that is really the, kind of the moniker of operationalized AI, is making that difference, from a very data-driven perspective. You can measure that difference inside the enterprise.
Okay. Ja Jamie, as was mentioned, you and I are on a ton of calls together, and whenever you're on a call, we're actually talking about how we can practically use AI, not just hand wave and talk, use a lot of acronyms, but how we can practically do exactly what Stephen said for our clients. Can you just speak just broadly about how we think at Sparq about AI? Like what in the enterprise ecosystem, how do we think about that?
Sure. We want to make it a data first kind of approach. Obviously, we want to take clients' data and make it work for them. An instance of that comes to mind recently is we were with a client who had exactly what Stephen said, a pain point, extreme pain point that was taking them upwards of 3 to 4 months to onboard a client. And we developed a solution that could bring it down to 3 to 4 days, utilizing AI. So, and working with their data is the key point there. And data cleansing is a key point there. And I know you're going to open up the floor for that. And I was also going to add, recently I read an article about a company, and probably a lot of people have heard of this company. It's called Scale.ai. The guy set out to change the way that AI is thought from a utilitarian standpoint. He was able to get himself into these large companies and say, the key to getting these successful AI deployments, like Stephen was saying, is data, clean data, data cataloging. So his approach was, I've got 50,000 people to throw at it manually, and utilize just let us in there and get the data correct, and your deployment will be in good shape. So that's the approach I think that we try to take at Sparq at a smaller level, of course, but that's the approach I like to take in any AI deployment that we do here.
John, just from a data engineering perspective, when we talk about preparing data for AI, how does that differ from classically, having data structured maybe for reporting or data analytics? When we talk about preparing data for AI, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities there. I think it's really having data governance from your source system. It's about having the ability to, because you're training AI like you're training one of your business analysts, right, on, or your business person on the data. And so if you have dirty data, it thinks very logically. And so at that point, if there is something in there, it's not gonna say, hey, this looks weird, unless you tell it that it looks weird, like a good curious problem solver would. And so preparing is making sure that it's clean, it makes sense. The good news is, and the reason why we can do it at a smaller scale and we don't throw 5,000 people, 50,000 people at cleaning, a customer's data, is because you can also use AI to clean your data. So you have the person who tells and says, hey, this is what the data should look like, and it tells the AI, hey, it tells the LLM, this is how it should look like. If something doesn't look right, send it to me. And that's a very easy process today with how, or a more simpler process, I should say, not necessarily easier. It's more simpler in the sense of you're able to tell it what it needs to do, and then it will tell you, hey, like this doesn't look right, and then you can go ahead and fix it versus having to send 50,000 people or however many people, I forget how many people Jamie said the company said, to clean that for you. And so at the end of the day, it helps with making that a lot more efficient so you don't need to use as many people. And that's what AI is really good at, right? It's really good at pattern matching and saying, hey, look at, like, this doesn't match the pattern that I have. And so something's wrong with it. Let's not push it into your data. Let's, you deal with it. Tell me how to deal with it. And then it learns as you're going through. And so instead of having to add, 10, 15, 20 more rules, it starts learning that and picking it up and then starts, changing it for you versus having to wait and add more rules to it and let bad data go into your environment.
John, you talked about this a little bit. I think clearly we're advocates of using AI to prepare data for AI, and that may seem a little cyclical, but stepping back, Stephen, talk a little bit about how we help people, our clients specifically, identify problems that can be solved with AI, because there are clearly two circumstances in almost every call that the four of us are on. Invariably, their AI comes up, and there is the idea that it's magic fairy dust, and if you just sprinkle AI on whatever, it gets better. That is not our viewpoint as a company. There are things that humans are great for, that are ideal for, and things that AI is able to facilitate in a much more effective way. And I think those are the two things. One is AI is everything, and then B is, how is this going to impact my people? And I think the middle ground is, how is it that we as Sparq identify opportunities for AI to be effective?
Yeah, and there's an ecosystem of answers around that, right? Across the enterprise, a lot of opportunities there. Drawing back to the topic of this particular webinar today, which is in the data sphere, right? So in the data domain space for enterprises, how do we recognize that ripe circumstance for application of AI? And John brought up a couple, and Jamie brought up a couple as well. When you are working through the exercise of data normalization, right? So we're trying to build a master data management strategy inside a company. That's a struggle, right? Because you've got a lot of very different schema types, right? Different taxonomies of data that need to be ingested and formed into a single meaningful whole, right? That can then be used by the business. That's a very manual exercise in today's world, right? So you can set up a lot of pipelines to get that data, but each one of them has to be tuned for that receiving schema that's coming in, and mapping it to the destination schema, right? Yep. That's very, very complicated to do initially, but then as John mentioned, you get drift on either end, right? So maybe that destination schema needs to change because the business is driving it. I need new fields or whatever. On that receiving schema, there could be drift as well. The cool thing about AI and applying it here is that it can not just automate a lot of that initial ingestion, right? And right out of the box, a lot of the tools that we use built on top of technologies that already exist many times inside our customers' enterprise environments, things like Snowflake, for instance, or the toolkits that are available in AWS or Azure, GCP, right out of those frameworks. We can build an AI component that will create on ingestion the inference to say, okay, I recognize in the destination schema, last underscore name is the same as capital L last capital N name. I'm going to suggest that I change these for you, right? So really puts the human into a curation mode as opposed to a, kind of, again, a heavy lifting mode. So this is what we're talking about when we're saying recognizing the opportunities. Now, if you can automate a lot of that through AI and then keep it learning, right? So even after the initial ingestion, things change. The AI says, hey, things have changed. I'm going to look at it again. Also, every time you curate, it's learning about that curation. You're feeding it back into the engine, so it's getting better and better and better. This is how AI is different than a rules engine, which rules engines are usually static, right? You have to change it. The AI is dynamic. It can learn on its own. So those are some opportunities, right? You look at, and just that as an example, right? A lot of human effort involved, a lot of constant human effort involved, and a lot of opportunity for AI to come in and not just do it quicker, but in many cases better than the human element could do it, right? We've seen a lot of customers expressing that need, and we've solved for a lot in that arena as well.
Yeah. I think, Jamie, I'd love to hear you. Many times we speak of this as talking to data.
Yeah.
The tools that we're using I remember, and probably all of us remember writing complex queries that are easily sometimes hundreds of lines of code that are intricately joined and easily broken, very fragile.
Yeah.
What AI, the aha moment for many of our clients when we show them our kind of ingestion accelerators, are the ability for us to interact with the data, not in fix this join and make sure that this, virtualized table does X, Y, or Z, but we just tell the data, I'm noticing this. Can you
Yeah.
confirm that? Could you change that? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. And Stephen talked a little bit about it already. Is when we set these up, we want to make sure we get a good centralized schema to compare to, because this is a most of these applications are what I would call hybrid applications, where we are dealing with code that is helper functions, and that is more static, like Stephen said. But you're also dealing with, and we've not even talked about this, but prompt engineering. System prompts are the main key that drive these type of applications that you're talking about. You need to set up your system prompts correctly, and you need to pass the correct context as well. So not only are we passing a centralized schema of data types, field names, the key component of that is description as well. So what this ultimately does for that client is not only are we delivering an AI solution to help them get along, but we're also forcing them to document their schemas. And that's a key point moving forward into any application, whether it's AI or something else. To be able to document your schemas correctly is very key. But yeah, that's our focus on it. And when we're talking about these applications, when you talk about talk to your data, recently, I made a push to not only talk to a single one big table, as we would say in the business space, but to be able to talk to a schema, that has multiple tables, multiple relationships, multiple joins, those kinds of things. And we've been able to create that type of application at UPS, and we are delivering that this month for them to be able to predict next day air probability, and it's a text to SQL based application where they'll ask normal language questions, it'll build the SQL against the table, and they're off and running. So yeah, Josh, those are the type of applications we like to get involved with to solve these problems for these clients.
And just to piggyback on that, sorry, John, for a second, a broader concept here is that idea, and Jamie brushed up against this for a second here, is the idea of being able to ask questions of your data via natural language interface, right? So without having to understand, Josh, as you had said, this world that we came from, where do I need to know, SQL, PL SQL in order to be able to go in here and build a query, right, to specifically get that data out. We've enabled AI against a lot of these frameworks that we built to allow business analysts essentially to be able to come in and just ask a question. Can you show me this data against this data, in comparison over a period of time? Can you tell me something about the schema here, right? Can you tell me even something about the data itself? Maybe that, thematically the AI is seeing that a human is not seeing, right? Are there things that are coming up? This kind of bleeds into the world of prescriptive analytics using AI, to suss out meaning from data where a human might miss that. So there's a lot of opportunity there to interface with the data in a reinvented way, right? So just allowing for natural language to be a replacement for what used to be a very technical exercise, right? And we've had a lot of success in that area with some of our customers.
And
Sorry, John.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to add to that. You can not only talk to schemas, but you can talk to the metadata, the information that a lot of the newer and I guess older as well, databases are giving you to understand your data. And so it can use that data to help understand your data. So that's becoming more and more important. And I know that that's a a huge thing when it comes to these data governance and lineage and everything there. It makes it easier to talk to it versus having to go look at the metadata or write code to figure out what it's saying.
Yeah, when you were talking about the metadata, John, we talk about these agnostic tool sets that we're dealing with. Nearly every one of them have a way to be able to pass a schema context to an AI to be able to analyze. Snowflake, AWS, this recent project with GCP, we were able to do that as well. So yeah, that's very key in making sure that it's finely tuned for the end use case.
And Stephen, maybe you can answer this question. It occurs to me that in the old days, we tried to, in the old days being 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah, right.
we tried to understand, when we're thinking of making our data performant, to make pipelines work the way they should, to ETL and ELT processes. It was up to a human to notice those patterns, to see see what things should be indexed on for performance and make suggestions around the best ways to transform data. It seems like the power of what we're talking about here is that pattern matching that we're talking about. It has the potential that I think we've barely even tapped into, of really being able to transform entire data landscapes. And can you talk to that ability of pattern matching? Because yes, we're talking about it in the transformation space, but I think it has broad implications about data performance, data transformation more generally.
Yeah, absolutely. So and thank you for bringing this particular topic up, because even in our webinar series to date, we haven't discussed this thing yet, and it's a very important concept. The distinction between AI and a lot of other predecessor tools, if you want to call it that, is this differentiation between pattern matching, as you had said, and pattern recognition. Those are two very different concepts. So humans, we're very good at pattern matching, right? It's like you meet a new person and you immediately map them to all the other people that you've ever met. The first time I met you, Josh, I probably went through this exercise. Oh, he's just like Don or so-and-so, right? So we have developed that. And if you think about SQL, that's a modeling of pattern matching, right? Yeah. So we structure the data, we structure the queries so that it can answer the questions we already know to ask, right? That is pattern matching. AI is very, very good at pattern recognition, which is step back away from any preconceptions that you have and tell me very, very, like from a scientific perspective, right? Very unbiased perspective. What thematically are you seeing that maybe doesn't fit with the patterns that I would know to ask already, right? So this is where we start getting in that realm of prescriptive analytics. That is what the term means. It's this concept of show me things, show me meaning or divine meaning out of it in a way that I, as a human, wouldn't be able to necessarily see. This is becoming very, very much a powerful concept in just looking at data in general and structuring data. We have folded it back in to use that concept to recognize in the data itself, right? How can we make this more optimized, right? And what are those patterns that, we should be paying attention to? But, maybe Josh, that's a topic for a future webinar we could dig down and spend some time talking about it, because there's a lot in there, right? It's a very, very powerful thing.
There is, and John, I know you have something to add here, but you said something that I think is very illustrative. The importance of being able to eliminate bias. I think it is something that AI has the power to do that humans struggle doing. If I'm the architect of a data, if I created a data architecture, I have hidden bias about the way things are mapped and the way things are related to one another that limit me or can limit me in what I see. I think the benefit of AI is the ability to restrict its bias to exactly what we want it to focus on and what we want it to draw its inferences from. And if either John or Stephen can just talk about the power that provides, because eliminating bias really opens up the world of what we can do with our data.
Yeah, and I'll start, and I know John has opinions on this, so I'm going to give him, I won't hog the whole time, I'll give him a window to add his opinion in here. But it is the move from subjective to not just even objective, but empirical, right? And that's a really important thing, because businesses to date, without the power of AI, even when they are talking about their raw data, it's still through the lens of that bias, as you had said, right? A human bias. And quite honestly, businesses are missing real opportunities, right, to optimize either in their marketing or, supply chain or whatever the case may be, right? So moving into that really truly empirical world is bringing out a whole new opportunity for efficiency, right? And that's that, again, that's a powerful concept, and it's not just exponential; it's logarithmic, in terms of that kind of value that's getting added back into the business, just with a simple change around the ideas, again, from subjective to more empirical. And I'll stop there so John has a second to talk about it.
Yeah, and I would say it kind of becomes a superpower for whoever is looking at it, right? Because being objective and empirical is very important, but we all know that there is that need for um, that human curation and walking through. So I think with those two things put together, it gives them a lot. It gives them both sides of the story versus just having one side of the story and the other side of the story. And so with AI, it's very empirical, it's very logical, it's very that you have that piece, so you see things that you may not have seen before, but then you can use those things to create value um based on your experiences and those types of things, and thinking, kind of being creative outside of what that is. So it basically gives you a superpower versus it being an either or is better. I think both is very important, and it's that kind of yin yang type thing that you kind of need running businesses and walking through.
I think that's exactly right, John, because I think we typically get either the yin or the yang. And I think that you're either solely kind of leaning in on gut. I feel like it's this way, or you're saying, empirically data driven, it's this way. I think and we've talked about this in several of these webinars. I think it's the fusion of both and being able to hold them separately rather than it being some sort of muddy mixture, being able to hold both things separately. I think that's where, I think, like we've all talked about now, human curation is so key. We're able to apply the right filter to the empirical data that we want and need. I do want to shift, because one of the things, kind of where the genesis of a lot of this came from is we see this need in a lot of modernization efforts where there is legacy data, and we're modernizing that data. Can you talk a little bit about, traditional legacy data silos, and why this modernization effort, where we've begun to use AI to do that, why is it so important to modernize the data? And I'll just open it up to the entire panel. Maybe Jamie, since you're neck deep in this, maybe you could start. But why is it important to modernize data? That's maybe obvious question to those of us on the panel, but I think sometimes we're really used to the way things were. Why is that important?
Right. Well, it goes back to our documentation process. Not only was, if you do modernize your data now, it brings you to current, right? But it also allows, your data engineers to accurately work with your data, and accurately be able to pass that data along to any AI model. Like I've mentioned before in earlier, it's a happy medium of user curation and AI curation to get that modernization correct. And I'll pass it on to John or Stephen to add to that.
And I would just say you're modernizing your systems, right? Data is
Yep.
going to be data. It's very similar. It's been similar throughout the years. there's new data that comes out that you can get to when you modernize your system. So I would say modernizing your platforms is very, very important in the way of it gives you the tools to be able to get the most out of the data that you're pulling from. And I would say the same thing when it comes to ERPs, when it comes to any system. There's new technologies coming out every day to help make sure that things are cleaner, things are more efficient, so that way your people can, the people who work for you can actually focus on value added tasks versus trying to clean up the data and playing whack-a-mole all the time. What I see is there's always a lot of technical debt because everybody wants, everything yesterday. And so when we run into businesses, you run into that problem, and so you incur a ton of technical debt and complexity within your data pipelines. And the nice thing is that you can add more calories and more velocity to your team by implementing AI and modernizing your platform versus having to just always kind of try to keep the lights on. And you can do more value added, more forward thinking, the things that enjoy people, and um it actually helps keep people in your organization and valuable people because they're focusing on new and fun problems versus the same thing that they have to deal with being on call or staying up late and dealing with issues that could have been fixed if you started the right way or you changed it the way that it should be.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think at a macro level, we're at this inflection point, right? When it comes to data inside the enterprise, how AI can maybe create a model for moving forward that doesn't bind you, by restriction, as things change. There's a potential, a high potential for a much more fluid kind of concept around your data taxonomies, right? The structures of your data inside the enterprise that, quite literally with the advent of AI, now you can have a lot of different data pools interacting with each other and very seamlessly without a need for the high degree of structure that used to be there, right? So this is an important kind of time period for enterprise data, operationalized AI, as we've been talking about it, kind of the meld between those two things. Because quite literally, we are seeing a future where you don't have to understand all your use cases, right, for a period of time around your data to how to create a prescriptive structure, right? Underlying data layer for this. You can react to that in much more real time, right? Without having to go through the entire exercise, right? So, in the future, what we see is once you're past that hump of invoking AI to help you with this exercise, that you actually create an environment where you really pretty much don't have to do it again, right? Because the AI is going to do that for you, right? It can honestly reach right back into your data structures and change things if you give it that permission and you want it to, with curation, of course, as we had talked about already. But this is an interesting time, right? With the blend of the importance of data becoming more and more prevalent, but also the power of AI giving it more and more flexibility. And we're seeing a lot of that, problem solving with our customers today.
I think in tangential to that, I think you're talking about the power of AI. Jamie suggested something the other day that I had never thought about. He made the comment, you can ask AI which AI to use. You can ask AI which model. And I felt, I was like, duh, but I mean, what does AI know more about? What does an LLM know more about it than itself? And so even the tuning of AI tools as they begin to be in use, they're able to inform the better use of other models, and I think it's a fascinating, you mentioned logarithmic, Stephen, where I think the reason that we're seeing such growth and why, the old days is only 2 or 3 years ago, I think is because we're seeing such innovation and change at such a rapid clip that I mean, it's hard to keep up. And maybe Jamie, as one of the guys who's is most immersed in this, how do we help our clients choose the tools? You know, if every tool is raising its hand saying, "Hey, use me,"
Yeah.
and every data platform now has, and hyperscaler has AI built in at a very core level, how do we help clients choose the right mix for their specific use case?
Yeah, it's always different for different clients,
Right.
depending on their environment. We want to use the tools that are available to them. We don't necessarily want to build a new model or anything like that. We want to use the tools that are available to them. Snowflake has Cortex. It's very flexible to be able to use a lot of different models. GCP has Gemini, and you're able to utilize Gemini for a lot of different things. The list goes on, but it really depends on the user case and the user story. What do you want to get to? And that really depends on what models you would like to use, especially the use case. You want to make sure you're in tune with what they're really asking for.
So
Yeah.
go
Oh, go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, sorry. And that's the beauty of AI, right? It allows you to be tool agnostic, and to be able to walk through and pick the right stack for the right use case and the right business. Like you wouldn't necessarily want to bring a competitor into another company's space. And you want to use the tools that your developers are used to and to be able to build that on. So
Yeah. There's also and I don't think there's a broad perception of this out in the market, but we're certainly seeing it that AI is moving out, especially in the space of operationalized AI. It's moving out of the nascent stage, right?
Right.
It's becoming more specialized. So a lot of the engines themselves becoming specialized, the LLMs, they are becoming more problem specific, right? So we as a firm are very well versed across the entire ecosystem of those. So it allows us, how John and Jimmy have talked about this, to meet our customers where they're at. A lot of times it's with stuff they already have inside their enterprise, but you have to take that as well to match it to, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? So understanding all the different tools that are out there, being able to match that to the specific need of the customer, I think is another important aspect of it.
And Josh, a lot of times in these client discussions that we're talking about, we'll utilize AI to help them to determine what their use case is.
Right.
But you give us a little bit, we'll go off and give you a lot. All right, and it's part of the discussion that we go through. We go through it a lot with different clients, but it's goes back to what you were stating earlier. Using AI to build AI, we use it every day.
Well, and I think what we're seeing, just Spark as a company, AI first is not just a moniker that our CTO uses all the time. It really is becoming part of the DNA of the way we do everything, where we are maximizing productivity, not just, some of the genesis of the tools that we're using is that not that we just created an accelerator for an accelerator's sake. It's the way we do work, whether it's in proposals or product discoveries or data discoveries or data ingestion and transformation. We're finding that the common use of AI, the very mundane use of just using it in everything, we're finding that to be the most powerful force multiplier, not in you know, the amazing, a robot, as a teammate, which I think, probably is coming down the pike. But I think we're finding just incredible power in the trenches with our clients, helping them do what we're doing in real time as a company. That just operation, because operationalizing of AI for us is not just in the data and not just in the area of data ingestion. We're finding, I mean, Jamie listed 3 or 4. I mean, I think we probably could spend, the next hour talking about all the areas that we're seeing just amazing transformative results using AI. I want to just acknowledge we have 5 minutes left. If anybody has a question, we really want to take time to answer those. But while we're waiting for questions, Stephen, Jamie, John, any last thoughts that you might want to bring up?
Just for me, and Josh, this is echoing what we've talked about, but you hit the nail on the head, right? Your last kind of observation about this. It AI is becoming pedestrian, not so much novel anymore, right? So this is something that is just feeding itself into every aspect of how we are working today. I also want to throw out the fact that people shouldn't be afraid of this, right? Because there is this idea, and I don't know if our culture's just seen too many of those sci-fi movies, right? The Matrix, et cetera, where AI is taking over and, you know, kind of dehumanizing us. It allows us, it's a tool, it's like any other tool, right? I remember when I was a kid, because it was ages ago, that you were not allowed to use a calculator in math class, right?
Right.
And it's ridiculous. My kids came to me and said, I need a, you know, TI, you know, 33, you know, graphing calculator in order to do my homework. I'm like, that's $180. But, you know, I'm like, don't you write out cosine anymore? And they're like, no, of course not. Why would we do that, right? Most people, and this will just take a second, don't realize that back in the 1930s, I believe, or maybe 1920s, there was a huge outcry of a new invention in the market. And they called it the anti-robotic movement because people were pushing back on this so much. And they were same sort of noise that we're making about AI. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their job. What is it going to do to our economy? And that invention was the rotary dial telephone. Because what are all the operators going to do if people can call their own phone numbers from home, right? So, and again, it's just a tool. We evolve to use the tool to its highest degree of efficiency. We're going through that right now, right? So a lot of the use cases we talked about today, we're not taking the human out of the equation. We're empowering them to hold authority over AI, right, by virtue of curation. So, so it's interesting, right? Another aspect, maybe we could have a different webinar around is like, you know, how do you de-escalate the fear and the anxiety, adoption anxiety around AI in general? But my thought.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I mean, literally AI is the calculator for language, and language is such an important part of our being. And so it again, it allows us to be it allows things to be easier. You'd still need to understand what you're talking about because obviously AI can get it wrong. Just like if I don't put in math in the order of operations like I should to in a calculator, you can get the wrong answer from it because it's still driven by us. But at the end of the day, like realizing that I still need to understand what's going on. But the cool thing is, instead of having to go to Google and read all the, Google and Stack Overflow and all this stuff for my job, I can just go ask AI to help me understand something or help me get to a place. And so it just becomes a calculator to get my job done quicker so I can do more creative stuff and more stuff that adds value versus sitting and looking at spreadsheets all day, which no, I don't think anyone enjoys that. If they do, then hooray for them. But like I I hated that part of my job and I try to automate that as much as possible so that way I can do more value added stuff. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll finish up, Josh. For somebody who spent the bulk of their career automating things, having another tool like AI in your tool belt only empowers you to make things faster, quicker, more efficient. And what I'm seeing across the data sphere is the taboo of what Stephen was mentioning is actually being lifted. There's a lot of client or a lot of companies who are not not outlawing AI as much as they were before. No, once they were able to ascertain the thought of having a private model within their own instances, they were good. And that's what I'm seeing as we go forward.
Yep, for sure. I did notice Doug has sent a couple messages into the chat. Thank you, Doug, for being engaged. Absolutely, you could reach out to us via LinkedIn, any of us, and we're out there. You can find us, and we'll be happy to connect with you and chat with you a little bit about your journey. Also, you're asking this question about, just to paraphrase, so Doug had asked the question, is there an opportunity with the advent of AI for the elimination of what we would think of as the structured data world, right? Probably fundamentally no, right? You know, what you're always going to have is a need for some level of structured data inside your systems. And the reasons for that are around performance, basically, right? So if you're needing things that are more scalable, performant kind of real time, near real time, no such thing as real time in this world, but near real time access, close to synchronous access and data, you do need some structure there because the performance just isn't there from a generalized data model perspective yet to be able to interoperate at that high of a frequency. So we do still have a need, but this idea of being able to connect multiple data sources to kind of build a single cohesive whole, that won't require what we normally think of as all the exercise that currently wraps itself around the structured data world, right? That is devolving right now, decomposing right now and becoming more AI centric. That's a real opportunity. But we don't envision a future where SQL is going to be disappearing, right? I think it's going to be more targeted and how it gets applied inside of the ecosystem. It won't be the default necessarily anymore. It's going to be in these areas where we need something that's more performant. Happy to take contrary opinions to that if there are any, but that's the way I see it today.
Yeah, I think what we see is that with the advent of NoSQL several years ago, there was this either or mentality, and a lot of the issues that Stephen mentioned around structured data, I think, have gone away. I think the beauty and really great way to wrap this up is this operationalized AI. It allows for a type of data ingestion and a seamless data estate in a way where you can have the best of both worlds, where you really can let structured and unstructured data do what they do best, and have it be facilitated in a way where you can build models against it, etc. And so I think it's really an exciting time to be involved in data. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we've gone a little bit over. John, I see you jumped off mute. Do you have anything you want to close us with, or are you just sitting off mute and had nothing to say?
I forgot to mute my mic again, so sorry. That was my bad.
All of us that know John are always happy when he unmutes his mic because he always has something amazing to say. So I just want to thank everybody for your participation. And like Stephen said, Doug, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd love to communicate further. For anyone else who maybe your interest was sparked by something that we said, we'd love to have a deeper conversation. So reach out to us via our website. And we would love to talk more about your data and your specific use cases. So with that, I will wrap this up. Thank you so very much. Have a good afternoon.